Hi, Savannah.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good.
Let me just- There we go.
Hi, Donna. Donna Baumgartner, you're on.
There we go.
Bill.
Too much light behind me.
Donna, can you hear me? Donna, can you hear me? Donna? No? Yes?
What is she even looking at?
I don't know. Donna, can you hear us? Donna? I don't know. So Donna, what do you see on my screen? Just my face?
Yes. I mean, I see. Yeah. You mean like shared screen?
What do you see when I put this PowerPoint up? Do you see me at
I
all? Or
don't,
just
yeah. No PowerPoint, just you.
Okay. Oh, you don't see the PowerPoint. Okay.
No PowerPoint yet.
Okay. Let me see. I got to figure out how to do that. Okay. I wonder how I do that on this.
Should be at the bottom. There's a share screen.
Share.
Are you doing that? There you go.
Now do you see it?
I see part of it. Is the screen maximized? There you go. That's it. Yep.
All right. Donna? Okay, we'll give her a second to.
Here she comes. Okay, since it's just the two of us right now,
Yes,
I'll ask you a question.
Sure.
I'm still a little confused on how the certification for diagnostician works with being hired and all of that. So like with my situation, if I'm not technically hired yet, do I have to wait for that before I do something? Is there a time frame? I just don't want to miss a window of opportunity.
You don't need to be certified for anything, the situation that you're going to have.
Okay.
If they're not hiring you to be a diagnostician, then you don't have to have any of that paperwork done.
Okay, so then just whenever they do, I can still go in and apply and I'm not missing any window or anything. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't a time frame attached to it that.
No, and there's not a window for that kind of certification.
Okay.
That's any time. And if they decide at some point to hire you in that capacity, then then you can do that at any point.
Okay, good. Okay. I just wanted to make sure.
Hi, Jessica.
Hi, Dr. Kevin.
How are you, dear?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Good to see you today.
You too. I just ran my daughter to softball practice and ran back.
Well, good.
And you're not late.
No.
I know. I was hurrying. I was like, get out of the car, hurry.
All right, I don't know if Donna's coming back or not, but I guess we'll go ahead and get started. This week, we don't have, and I've already started recording, so I'll post this online when we're finished tonight. But this week, we don't have any activities. What I'm going to try to do is get discussion boards and activities from last week graded before this week is over, so that we can start next week's activities fresh. And then I can start grading this week's discussion boards and next week's activities and discussion boards fresh. So I'm going to try to stay on top of the grading if I can. But somebody chortle and laugh. Yeah.
Oh, no, I coughed. I'm sorry. Let me mute myself.
That's all right. There's not enough of us for the noise to be bothersome.
And I have no dogs today.
Oh,
so.
Yeah. Well, anyhow, the next week there'll be another activity, and we'll start the choice assignment. What I'm going to do is I'll post a video in the next day or so that gives you some information about the choice assignment. There are 2 choices, and you can pick which route you want to go. But I'll post information about those with a video explaining what the 2 choices are and how you make a choice and when you need to get your choice to me and all that kind of thing. So just be aware. I'll post an announcement when that video is up. It'll be in the next couple of days. So the information about the choice assignment is coming next. Hi, Tara.
Hi.
And then the research paper will be the next thing up, and then the group project will be the last thing up. And research project topics, I'll be posting a list of some possible research topics that you can consider. And then if you've got something else that's on your mind, you can run that by me. I'm going to be pretty open about research project topics, as long as it's narrow enough to give you some focus and concentration within the boundaries of this class. So I'll post that list here in the next day or so as well for research projects. The 2 choices for the choice project and the research project, just some food for thought on that. And then, like I say, you can choose one of those, or you can go beyond the focus for that if you'd like. I'm still kind of formulating the group project for the end of the semester, so we've still got a number of weeks that we can work on that. It will be kind of a program improvement sort of a project that you'll work on with other people. Since we're dealing with growing ourselves at the master's level in our leadership ability, it'll be something where you are looking at improving a special education program for students in a leadership capacity, something that the school district could benefit from if you were to develop that for their population. And so something that you may have even thought about already for your school district or for a population that you've worked with. You could be thinking about that, or maybe the group members that you'll be partnered with may have had some experience along those lines, and you can funnel your thoughts along that direction, things that you might do that would be beneficial to a program that you may have had contact with, or that a colleague has had contact with, that would help out a district that you've worked with, or that you are working with, or that you have read about, that would be beneficial to that program to help them grow in the things that they offer for kids with disabilities. So those are the things that are on the horizon in the next couple of weeks that we'll be looking toward. I hope you all have had a chance to look at the videos that we've posted for this week's. um, self-determination video. That one's pretty short. Well, they're all three pretty short. The one about self-determination, and then there are two others. So the other one is divided into two parts about the way families are impacted. And then the three chapters this week are about parents and families, the impact that they've had upon them with disabilities in the family. Professionals are kind of incorporated into some of that as well. And then we've got goals and objectives, and then the whole issue of self-determination. So we'll kind of dive into some of that. So let's start off with some discussion about families, unless anybody has questions about the things I just talked about, the projects or other assignments that are on the horizon. Anybody have any questions about any of that?
No.
Nope. Okay. We'll go ahead and dive in then. Let's see. As we start talking about understanding families of children with disabilities, and we may have people in our class this time who have children with disabilities. Some of you may have kids with disabilities. You may have family members who have children with disabilities, or you may have just dealt with families on your caseload who have children with disabilities. But there's a process that most families go through that is not unlike that of the grief cycle. There's that confrontation of the disability where we have shock and denial. We've got disbelief. We've got adjusting to the reality of the disability. We've got those stages as well of anger, guilt, depression, sometimes shame, and then the coming to terms with the disability in the child, and coming to the reality and the acceptance of that. And if you've worked with families with children with disabilities very much, you may have seen as the children get a little bit older, the family has come to that point of acceptance. Have any of you dealt with these phases in the actualization process for families who have children with disabilities? Any of you dealt with any of those things personal level?
I haven't worked with children with severe disabilities, mostly intellectual disabilities, specific learning disabilities. But I feel like the the parents who, when the discussion starts out with, your child has been found eligible with an intellectual disability, sometimes they don't really understand what that means, and then they revert back to, old terms like mental retardation, that kind of thing. And when you say it in that manner, or if they say it in that manner, sometimes they have more difficulty accepting that term, or understanding exactly what that means, or understanding what that means for their child's future, their education, kind of all those things wrapped up in one. I personally, and I shared this in my discussion today, I'm neighbors with a family whose daughter has Phelan-McDermid syndrome, and she is in a wheelchair. She's nonverbal. She doesn't walk. She doesn't feed herself. And so, although I've only known them for 7 years and she's 10, I wasn't there in the beginning when they first found out, but I have seen them, accept her and treat her just as they treat their 7-year-old son. And, just the community wraps their arms around them. And luckily we live in a very small community, and their church family and just everybody knows her and loves on her and treats her just like every other kid. They just know that, she has differences, and, they accept her just as she is. So I think they've done a great job of the acceptance part. Like, this is what God has given them, and this is what, we're going to accept and do the best we can. So, yeah, I think it just, I don't know, it depends on the family. I think it also depends on maybe the level of education and understanding. how much they know about disability and that kind of thing.
I think that's a true statement right down the line, Jessica. I think that the situation you describe is probably pretty ideal.
Yes.
I think there are a lot of families that don't have that good of a situation, unfortunately. In the videos from Ohio State University that are posted in Unit 2, several of those families, I think, describe situations that are much more bleak than the one that you describe. So it sounds to me like that family has a pretty good situation. Anybody else have?
And I just got to babysit her today.
Oh, really? Oh, well, that's so
her
nice.
mom, and that's one thing that I feel like I can do as a friend and a neighbor is, when she wants to go get her hair cut or go to the grocery store, something like I can be there to support her because Lord knows my kid spends enough time at their house. We have boys the same age and best of friends. And so, when I can do that, I want to do that for her because I know that it has to be stressful and just, making sure that Ella's happy and content while she's trying to get her hair done or go to the grocery store or whatever it might be. So, if I can help out for a few hours when I can, then absolutely do.
I think there are lots of families, as described in the video that we watched this week, where families talk about how one parent is not able to work, that the care of the child with the more significant disability requires the attention of one of the parents, and the research shows us that many times the family of kids with more significant disabilities suffers divorce because the stress on the marriage is so great. And so then that puts a greater burden on the finances of the family if the marriage doesn't stay together. In that particular video, they talk a lot about the income situation and the higher out-of-pocket costs that those families face, the social isolation. We invite friends over less frequently, so it's harder to run errands if you have a child with a disability. Just one thing after another that I think those of us who don't share that reality take for granted those kinds of circumstances. So we need to. I think we'll talk about this as we go along. The things that we can do in schools to help families who do have those situations. I think it was interesting in that video too to think about the impact on other children. Now, you just mentioned, Jessica, the son in this family that you're talking about plays with your child, but
Yes.
Many families who have kids with significant disabilities talk about the impact that it has on their other children and how their other children suffer social issues related to the presence of their child who has the more significant disability. And that's something that's not talked about very often because it's got a negative impact to it. But there is a social issue related to that. Some of the families said that their children are less likely to bring playmates home with them because of the presence of another child in the home who may have a negative impact on their socialization, things like that.
Yeah, I noticed that most of the families that shared that story or the part of how the siblings didn't bring friends home or weren't accepting of their other sibling, most of them I feel like were older siblings, and then the child with the disability was born later.
Yeah.
In my neighbor's case, their daughter is oldest. She's 10, and their son is 7, and so that's all he's known. And his name is Jackson, and he is like the sweetest, most loving, caring, like making sure everyone's happy, and just he has that ability or that knack to kind of just take care of take care of somebody or take care of you and
Yeah.
you know, keep everything balanced. And I think that's because he's had that experience with his sister, you know, to make sure that she's okay and to care for her and to watch out for her. So yeah, he knows no different. You know, I mean, he was here with his sister and, you know, came and checked on her every once in a while and, you know, made sure she was fine and happy. And, you know, I don't see that from him. I don't know if maybe later on, you know, as he gets older, if he'll have some of those characteristics where he might be a little shy or standoffish about inviting maybe new friends over that don't know Ella. But you know, right now it's not an issue for him.
That's good. There's a model for success in families like this that's called the resilience model. Look at these stages, and I'm going to close the blinds here a little bit. I've got the sun shining in my eyes, so y'all look at that for a second while I close the blinds a little, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so we've got stage 1 there, where we identify the disability, and then we get some self-education. That's where families get into that process. Sometimes that nasty thing, the internet, where parents get on and do a lot of self-education that way. Sometimes it's the more reliable channels, the medical profession, other avenues of self-education. Reflection about the self and the family. And then we move into advocacy and empowerment. And then appreciation and enlightenment. And we begin to share strength with others, sometimes in those latter 2 stages. The pictures here at the bottom of this slide are of Rick Hoyt. Some of you may have heard about this family. Rick is the young man here in the wheelchair, and that's his father with him. And he's gotten a lot of press through the last number of years. Rick's father was a triathlete and began to take Rick, who is a quadriplegic, with him on some of his runs. At which point, Rick said that he felt like he wasn't disabled when he was running with his father, which of course inspired his father to include him more and to give him those experiences. And they've had lots of press through the years. I think CBS did a big coverage of them when they participated in the Ironman triathlon a few years ago. And they've through the years done countless races with Rick's father carrying him through some of these races. They've got special bicycle and so forth, so that he can go along with his father on each leg of the journey. And he has been able to experience so much of the joy of competition with his father. But this family is a great example of the resilience model. They have not let the disabilities of Rick hold them back in any way. They've, of course, identified the disability early on, educated themselves, incorporated that disability into their family, advocated and empowered themselves along the road, and then, of course, have shared that with others through appreciation for and enlightenment of the things you can do with a disability. So I think that's just one example. You might want to follow that story. You can find that online under Team Hoyt. I believe HOYT the family name, and there's a website that has a lot of information about the things they've done together. But just one example, many examples out there of families who have embraced their situations and gone far with them. Here are some things we've touched on a little bit already, but some of the common challenges confronting family members. We've got that whole issue of self-education and some of the barriers that presents. There is a lot of misinformation out there, and so we've got families that confront issues when they begin the process of educating themselves and their other family members. The road to advocacy is sometimes pretty rocky. And how do you advocate for your child without being that family member that school districts hate to see coming, that doctor's offices hate to see coming, that therapists and so forth don't want to work with? How do you advocate for your child without being the person that the Medicaid office, the Medicaid office doesn't want to interact with? How can you press for everything that your child needs and wants without being the person that is considered pushy, but yet still push for the things that your child needs? There's a fine line there, and some parents have difficulty navigating that road. How about planning for the future of your child? That's another very difficult thing, because we've got a situation where a child is born, and then you've got to plan for them for forever, well past your own natural life. You've got to plan for that child into the life that will go beyond your own, perhaps. Peer rejection. I think, Jessica, you described a situation there with your neighbor and friend that may be a little bit unusual. I think a lot of people experience the situation where their friends and even family members withdraw from them somewhat when they have a child who has a lot of needs. And so I think your friend is very fortunate to have a good support group with people like you in her life. And we've touched on this a little bit already. The siblings of the child sometimes suffer because they're forced into a situation with less parental time. They have to take a smaller portion of their parents' attention. Sometimes there's jealousy. It sounds like the situation that Jessica describes, the mom and is there a dad present? Okay, good. Sounds like they've done something there to work that out so that there's not jealousy, or at least not a lot. Sometimes the child in these situations has added responsibility. They have to up their game in order to make the household run in a more efficient way. And sometimes we've got the issue of embarrassment. The child doesn't want to bring other kids home, or is embarrassed that their sibling is at school with them and maybe has to go down the hall to that special class, or rides a special bus, or other things like that. Sometimes the parents have done such a wonderful job in building a system at home that the child doesn't have those issues. But sometimes it falls to us as the school to help structure a system for that sibling to combat some of those issues.
Dr. Cavan, I mentioned my sister-in-law in my discussion post. My sister-in-law and brother-in-law are 50 and 51, and they have an 18 and a 20-year-old natural-born typical daughters, but then have adopted a sibling pair. Now the children are 6 and 2.
Oh, wow.
They got the 6-year-old when she was, I don't think she was a year old yet. And same with the brother. When he came along, they got him. And I've talked with her because, she has a comparison story where she raised, her typical developing children and then adopted these other two. with special needs, and she has talked about all of these things that you have just mentioned. But the interesting thing that she expressed to me was that when your child with special needs has disabilities that are visible, there tends to be a little more outward show of compassion and support and things like that,
Mhm.
where her children were drug babies and have, different kinds of trauma. And so while they very much have special needs, it's not the visible type. And so when they're acting out behaviorally or things like that, people don't realize what it is. They just see an acting out child. And so her struggle with the advocacy part is trying to get what her kids need when there's nothing visible to see, to say, oh yes, well, you should have that. And she said that's been probably the most challenging part as far as getting the children what they need, and the embarrassment, the rejection from friends, the whole just the family dynamic, all of those things that we heard in the video, she's also dealt with. But she said that's probably the main difference for her, is that her kids' disabilities aren't seen.
So interesting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I can imagine that's very true.
Mm-hmm.
You all know that, maybe y'all aren't like me, but if I have friends who have, and I don't have this much of an issue anymore, but when I was younger and my kids were younger, if I had friends who had poorly behaved children, I didn't want to be around them.
Mm-hmm.
We steered clear. We didn't go to Chuck E. Cheese with the naughty kids.
Mm-hmm.
We stayed away from the naughty kids, and we tried to hang out with the better behaved kids. And so, if your child has a behavioral issue, or if your child's disability creates a behavioral issue,
Mm-hmm.
then people are going to avoid your child.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to avoid you. And if you have typically developing kids too, they're going to avoid your family, because people don't want to hang out with, or at least a lot of people, like maybe my family, wouldn't want to hang out with the kids who are, too rambunctious or too loud, or too, whatever that happens to be, that quality happens to be, that's considered disruptive.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are other people who cater to that and are really, really good with those kinds of issues. But some people, steer away from that just naturally. And so those kinds of issues that seem just disruptive in general tend to run some people off. And that's an issue, whether your child has a diagnosed disability or not. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about. If you can't see it from the outside, we're certainly more sympathetic with the child who has an orthopedic impairment, is in a wheelchair, or has something that we can hang our hat on as far as a diagnosed disability is concerned. Very good point. So how can we as educators effectively partner with parents? What can we do to help bridge this gap? Any ideas?
Well, in the text, I remember it saying that there were two things that you should remember no matter what, is don't assume that the families with a child with a disability are struggling to raise that child. Don't just take that assumption and say, oh, poor thing, you must need all this help. And then two, make sure that you're aware of helping in an appropriate way, that you're not taking the power of the parent trying to solve their own problems away from them. And so what I took out of that was, just kind of be a listener at first. Listen to them. I think a lot of times parents just want to talk to somebody who knows their child. So as educators, hopefully we know as much about their child as they do, to provide good quality care and instruction to them. And so just listening and being that ear to hear their struggles if they have any, and hear their requests for help, and then, from there, try to steer them in the right direction.
That's really good.
Mm-hmm.
A listening ear.
Mm-hmm.
I think that second point that she brought up about, well, I'll just tell you one thing that my sister-in-law said when she was talking about the services that are available and resources that are available. She said, they have so much that is made available to them that on the surface level, it sounds wonderful and great and everything. But she said, once you get into it, it's very cookie cutter. And she said, so they say, okay, we have this for you, but then you really have to accept it on their terms. And it doesn't always work for your family, for your schedule, or even for your child. It may not be the appropriate resource that your child needs. But there's nothing you can do about it. They say, here, this is for you. But then, like she said, they take all your power, the parents' power away, and just kind of force that on. And I kind of feel like that's what I see in schools sometimes too, that, okay, your child is eligible for special education services, and that's great and wonderful to some parents' ears, but then when they think they're going to get help, then I feel like we're coming back to them and saying, except they can't have this, or we can only do it during this time, or we can only see them once a week, or we can, and it just doesn't end up seeming like help after all.
I think a parent in one of the videos, the Ohio video, shared that same concern, is that her child had autism, and although the school was going to provide OT for 20 minutes a week or speech for 90 minutes a week, she still felt like he needed more. Mm-hmm. And so he wasn't getting more from outside sources because he was waitlisted everywhere. And so she was sharing her frustration with, I'm trying to get him what he needs, but I can't because there's no service available at this time. So yeah, it's hard, I think, for educators and service providers to know that the child needs more, but we have to be realistic.
And I think it falls under that educational need, because it all comes down to, we can provide if they have an educational need for it, and that's hard when you're looking at a whole child, as a parent and even as an educator too. I've tried to advocate for students to receive certain services that I've really felt like would be beneficial to them, and they would be beneficial, but I guess achieving that standard of educational need that they need to be able to receive it is different. So
right, and you get to that issue of maximizing benefit versus providing, what the law used to say, what the courts used to say was that basic floor of opportunity, that we had to provide that basic floor of opportunity, that we did not maximize benefit. And so that was kind of the standard for a long time, based upon the court case. Oh, can anybody help me? Back in 1982. I can't remember the name of it. Donna, I can't hear you. Donna, are you talking to me? Donna, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. I can't hear you if you're talking to me. Anyway, I think you know what I'm talking about. I can't remember the court case. Anyway.
She can type in chat if she hits
type
chat.
in chat if you remember it, okay? Does anybody see? Unmute yourself. Can she unmute?
I think she was, because it just showed up. See, there she is.
That little girl, I can remember all the details of the case. Anyway, I don't know that it matters a whole lot. But anyway, the more recent case that we have, the one that passed just this last year, the Andrew case out of Colorado, that one kind of changed the standard. And so we've got to maximize a little more than we used to. But we still don't maximize to the full extent. That's not the school district's responsibility. But we do more than we used to. And so the Supreme Court said that that basic floor of opportunity is not enough anymore. But it's kind of a slippery slope. And I think that that whole issue of educational need and where we stop is a hard thing to determine. So what are some barriers to communication? A little cartoon here says, the bad news is your son failed every test I gave this term. The good news is that we know he's not abusing any mind-expanding drugs, because mine hasn't expanded. Sometimes the school personnel are really at fault when we sit down with parents. We do this in art committee meetings. We do it in parent-teacher conferences. We do it when we're explaining test results from a diagnostic perspective. We begin with kind of an unequal relationship. We tend to, from an educational perspective, sometimes to talk down to parents, and we tend to be the know-it-all educators on our end of the equation, and I've got to be real careful about that. We've got to be aware of opportunities for miscommunication. I know that in my other classes, I've talked to all of you all a great deal about the overuse of acronyms. We've got to put things in a language that parents can understand, and then be very collegial as we talk to them. Got to be aware of differing styles of communication. We've got to understand that we all come to the table with a different agenda. Sometimes parents want only to know that their child is safe and secure and somewhat happy during the school day, and that's their primary concern. Perhaps those IEP objectives aren't the main thing that they're really worried about, whereas that's the teacher's concern. Are we meeting those goals and objectives before the next calendar year rolls around? So we've got to get on the same page. Sometimes those cultural barriers are the things that stand in the way. So we've got to determine what are the things that are stopping us from communicating, what are the things that are our common ground, and where can we meet. The first and most important thing is that we've got to know that the student is the thing that we've all got to agree upon is the focus of the meeting. And you've all heard of the best way to communicate is to sandwich some sort of criticism between two compliments. And so we can always start out by talking to parents about the good things that their child can do, and then putting the things that they can improve upon in the middle, and then winding up with some more good things. Everybody likes to hear the good about their child, and we can't say too much good about a child in any setting. Sometimes the very words that we choose are what's important. So we can avoid words like troublemaker and instead substitute with things like that are very objective, very behavior-based. Like he disturbs the class. He has disturbed the class 3 days this week. Things that are data-oriented. He's unprepared for class, has that negative bent to it. Instead, he has come to class without his supplies 3 days this week. Instead of he's a poor worker, he hasn't completed his assignments. Instead of he's lazy, he requires multiple reminders. Instead of a behavior problem, some other things that perhaps pinpoint the things that the child is doing rather than labeling the child as lazy, a behavior problem, other kinds of things that put a name on the child, a label on the child, rather than being descriptive about the behavior. Stepping back and looking at the situation more objectively. Those of you who are looking at becoming diagnosticians, we want to use those kinds of things too when we are doing our report writing, as well as when we're talking to parents. So let's shift gears a little bit here. That's all about chapter number 4. How about chapter 5? This is the one about person-centered planning. I want you to look particularly in that chapter. We only have a few minutes left to talk. There's a plan in there called the McGill Action Planning System, or MAPS. I want you to take some particular look at that as you focus on that chapter. There's also a plan called the Coach Plan, Choosing Options and Accommodations for Children. We want to really focus with our population of people who have significant disabilities to look at these kinds of approaches that are meaningful in planning for their educational opportunities and for their life after school. Things that will make the school day have meaning into the future. And then the next chapter looks at determining the educational goals for this population. There's a section on adaptive behavior scales. Those of you who've already had my class in the spring, we've talked about that and how it's a part of making a determination for an intellectual disability. You've got to have your adaptive behavior scales, so pay attention again to that portion. Ecological inventories are discussed there, and then back to self-determination. So as we kind of finalize this discussion, think about the video that was the top of the 3 in the video section of this week's unit. We've had several adults who talked about self-determination in what I thought was a very articulate way for some of the individuals who had some pretty significant disabilities. A good mantra, I think, that you can use to attach to the issue of self-determination is this: nothing about me without me. So no decisions are made about me without me. I'm part of everything that has to do with decision making for me. And I think that all of those individuals in that short video certainly had grasped that philosophy. And so think about that a little bit as we move forward with this week's unit. How can we incorporate self-determination and quality of life into that IEP process? What do you think about that as we close out this discussion?
Can you hear me, Lisa?
Yeah, now I can. Yay.
Okay. All right. Sorry, Dr. Kevin. I don't know what happened. In looking over the chapter, we need to let these students and let our kids be part of the IEP process. And that was the one thing I saw in schools. They weren't. Our students didn't have choices. They weren't part of the plan of what is going to help them.
Mm-hmm.
They need to be part of it. It is their life. They know what's going to help them. They know what types of, I don't want to say strategies because they don't know the actual strategies that are going to be used. But they know what's going to help them. They know what they need, especially as they start getting older, especially as they start transitioning out of middle school into high school, out of high school into a regular life. Let them be a part of this. And that so many times we don't let them because we figure we know better than you do. No, we don't. They need to be a part of it.
Absolutely. And that's the the whole focus of self-determination and the person-centered planning. Anybody else?
One thing that I took away from the video and a commonality among all of the adults that spoke was the ability to make their own choices. I know that's the same as nothing about me without me, but that's just something that I feel like was common vocabulary among all of them. They said, they wanted to feel more independent and be able to make the choices that affected their lives instead of somebody making those choices for them.
Well, and it seemed very evident to me that the adults in their lives, the teachers, the educators, the therapists, the parents in their lives had helped them formulate those opinions. I don't think they had come by those naturally. I think people had helped them with that language. Someone had taught them the language of self-determination, because I don't think people ordinarily functioning at that level have that vocabulary. So someone has helped encourage them with that language. That's the effort of the school district and the families cooperating with that say this is important for these individuals to be able to say, these are the things I want in my life, and this is how I'm going to get that. And so it says to me, this is part of the curriculum that we've got to instill in our young people, certainly in the second half of their education. I think that we can begin that in the early part of education, but certainly in the second half, we've got to incorporate that language into everything that we do in schools and teach our young people that they've got to be responsible for their life, because no one else is going to take that full responsibility. And we can incorporate that into our educational process and help them be aware of the things that they can be responsible for.
And that needs to start even at the elementary age, because as a person who has not been in the secondary schools and had experience with the students participating in their own meetings, helping to develop their IEPs, talking about transition. I'm in the elementary world where they're so young and learning, appropriate this and that. And like every little thing they do, we're having to tell them, you can do this, but not this, or this is the way you do this. And this, it's every little thing. And so this summer, as I've started reviewing ARDs from the secondary level and see that the things that are written in there that the students have expressed that they want to do when they grow up, that was eye-opening to me, because I don't think we consider that as much at the elementary level. Just the very basic, what do you want to be when you grow up, maybe happens at the beginning of the school year, maybe one other time, but we don't really consider asking them or, giving them. I mean, I have with some fifth graders, but really that's probably the extent of it, my experience with that. So that was eye-opening to me, and that's something that we really need to start getting them, because Jessica's point about them asking for help, I think that kind of goes along with it. We have to be talking with them about these things so that they can even know what questions to ask as they grow up and start planning for their own future.
Yeah, asking for help is part of it. Yeah. Well, good. Other questions about these chapters? These concepts will be in the second quiz on parents and self-determination and goal setting, instructional goals, and so forth. All three of those chapters are covered in the quiz.
Do you have a designated time where you post the quizzes?
Well, I had the quiz ready to post tonight after this. And then I looked back at it, and it's got a question that was specific to Dr. Moore's lecture that I need to pull out and put a substitute question in. So I just pulled it, and I'm going to doctor that up, and I'll probably have it posted early in the morning.
So
Okay.
generally speaking, after the webinar is over.
Generally speaking, after the webinar. I had it ready to post it at 8 tonight, but I need to doctor it a little bit. I need to remove that one question and replace it. Okay.
Is there an option for you to open the quizzes back up once we take them or after everyone takes them for us to see which questions we missed?
Probably. Does it not show you which ones you missed?
No, Sedona and I were talking about that. Once we submitted it, it allowed us to see our score, but wouldn't let us view the quiz. And I just assumed it was because it wasn't closed yet. But after it's closed or after that, midnight deadline,
Yeah.
would there be an option for it to be opened?
Let me check and see. Okay. I'll do what I can to see if I can do that. Okay.
Okay.
I'm making myself a note. How was the quiz last week? It looked like most people did pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't too hard, was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just missed one, so I want to know
Okay.
which one I missed.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Let me look into that. All right. Any other questions? And I'll post a video about the choice assignments and the research topics. Anything else? All right, ladies. Thanks for tuning in. It's good to see all your smiling faces.
Thank you.
Dr.
Donna, I hope you had a good trip to California.
Thanks, Dr. Kevin.
You bet.
Huh?
I'll see y'all. Oh, hey, next week. Do y'all want to do Tuesday or Thursday?
We have presentations on Thursday
Yeah.
for
It's
another
starting
class.
at 4, don't you? Y'all just not want to do it on Thursday? You
I
want
just
to
don't know how long that will take.
Well, he said it was only going to take about an hour or so. So he told me today.
Huh. Oh, okay.
I mean, there's only, 5 of us in the
There's
class?
5 of us.
But I have no idea.
I don't know. It seemed like it was going to be more involved than that. So I was
He told
expecting.
me y'all weren't going to take more than 10 or 15 minutes apiece.
Yeah, I think the
Well, there's
rubric
5 of us.
says less than that, actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
He said y'all wouldn't be at it more than an hour or so.
4 to 6 minutes, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, something like that. So he said you'd be done in an hour.
Okay.
You want to get together on Thursday night at 7? Or Tuesday night at 7? I mean, y'all look like the ones who are
Either one.
joining.
Thursday's
Huh?
fine.
Either one.
Doesn't
Tara,
matter
do
to
you have
me.
any preference, dear? Because the 4th is on Wednesday.
Tuesday or Thursday would work for me. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
Whatever works best for them.
All right. Well, do you girls that have class care?
I don't.
Jessica and Sedona, do y'all care?
No, it's okay. If it's only going to be an hour or so,
Okay.
then that'll be fine.
Well, I may do Thursday then because that gives me a little more
Okay.
time to prep.
Okay.
Okay. Well, then
You
let's
post them afterwards, correct?
the video, the webinar.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that gives people less time to do it,
Thursday.
but
Well, Thursday night's our anniversary this week, so I'm thinking or next week, so I'm going to try to convince him to take me to dinner.
well, that's a good plan. I think he should.
I don't know
You
if
don't have
it'll work, but I thought maybe I could
Yeah,
try. And
you can watch it.
so as long as I can go back and watch it, yeah, it's no big deal.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then we'll shoot for next
Okay.
Thursday night, and I'll post an announcement about that. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Sounds
Ladies,
good.
nice to see you. Y'all take care.
Bye.
All
Bye.
right. Hey, Dr. Kevin.
Yeah.
Dr. Kevin.
Yes.
We're on for tomorrow at 1 and at 2.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's what I was seeing, but Sloan's email, one of them said 11 o'clock.
No, it's 1 and 2. Okay.
Okay.
All right. If you want to talk
It's
before
been
then,
crazy.
call me. Okay.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.